So the ankle joint is it's a very important joint when we're thinking about football and any other sport for that matter. The ligaments around the ankle are quite simple, and often we can tend to disregard the importance of an ankle sprain because often it's something that can be quite a trivial incident that can last 1 or 2 weeks, but the more serious stuff can last a bit longer. There are 3 main areas that we often sprain when we do have an ankle injury on the football field or netball court for that matter. The most common is our lateral ligament, and there are 3 main important bands there. There's an anterior band that runs across the actual front. That's the most important band that's often sprained. We've got a middle or a calcaneal band, and then there's a posterior band that runs across the back of the ankle joint. So we've got like almost a triangle coming out, but 3 very relatively thin bands. When we look on the inside part of the ankle joint, it's a really thick, beautiful array of ligament on that inside. So to sprain the inside is a lot more difficult. And because we've got a really thick band and a really relatively thin band, naturally when the foot hits the surface, we often roll outwards on that side because of the strength of this inside band of ligament. And that results often with a tear of that anterior band to a lesser degree, and more serious, you can tear the middle and also the posterior bands as well. You would have also heard a bit about the syndesmosis, which is not a new terminology, but certainly one that's in vogue now at the moment with regards to football. And that's simply the ligaments that binds the tibia and the fibula bone. It's really important for that stability as well. The syndesmosis is less commonly torn, but quite serious in nature, because without that ankle stability, we haven't got the true, what we call mortise around the actual ankle joint itself. So it's important for that to keep that stability long term. So when we're looking at ankle ligament rehabilitation, it is important for us to rehab not only your ligaments, but also the other associated functions, which include strength, which are the peroneal muscles that run along the outside part of the foot that gives us stability, and also balance, or what we call proprioception. The balance of the foot is extremely important to try and also prevent further injury when we are on the football field. So these things, if we don't rehabilitate, the chance of you reoccurring another injury is quite high. So we need to be thinking long term of prevention, because the more trauma you do to a ligament, unfortunately, the more laxity or looseness in the ankle joint we get. A ligament, for argument's sake, is say this long. When you tear the ligament, it'll end up that long. Now, when we repair, we don't go back to what it was. It'll stay in that lengthened position. Hence, we need to prevent further aggravation in the future. Otherwise, we will have a really loose, sloppy ankle. Implications for that is that we then start to get 2 surfaces rubbing over time, which can lead to osteoarthritis down later in life. So the importance of rehab is second to none. So we'll show you some balance exercises that we often do in the infancy stage with Evan, and we'll also show a bit of just basic assessment when I look at an ankle in terms of the laxity, which is quite important in my eyes as to what degree of rehabilitation is needed. So they shouldn't be looked at being a simple injury. An ankle injury is more of a serious injury that needs to be rehabilitated in order to prevent recurrent injury and also no problems, not to have any problems, should say, further down the track in 20 years' time. So looking at the lateral ligament here on Evan's ankle, we can see that it runs roughly from this fibula bone down towards that talus bone, and we've got the middle band, as I displayed initially before, and we've got the posterior band. We just do a bit of a test, and Evan's ankle here is really snug. So I can tell you from now he hasn't had any ankle sprains of the lateral ligament anyway. It feels quite snug indeed. On the medial aspect is his strong deltoid ligament, and I often stress that. And again, he's really tight medially and tight laterally. So Evan's got quite snug ankles from a ligamentous point of view. So we're going to show Ev the exercise of the balance re-education. I do use a wobble board for this. I love a wobble board. It gives me the best type of, I guess, overall holistic approach to educating his balance. Feet shoulder width apart. The whole idea is to keep the board off the floor, and if Ev's pretty good, we can then start to throw a ball at him to really sort of stress the balance in different directions. Ev, jump on the actual wobble board, shoulder width apart. Now try and prevent the board from touching the floor. Can you do that, Ev? So Ev's had a previous injury before, and this is where he's actually still struggling. So this is quite challenging for him, and that's understandable. He's had a past history of a syndesmosis injury. So you can see how your rehab, even for the balance, is a bit of a struggle. So I won't throw the ball as a progression to Evan because this is challenging enough in its own right. The second part of rehabilitation is strengthening those outside muscles, what we call the perineal muscles on the outside part of his leg. So balance is one aspect of it, but the strength is also quite important. We talked about the muscles that run along the outside part of the foot to give it support. We now have to educate them accordingly. So we're going to place this rubber tubing called TheraBand around Evan's feet 1 and 2. Yep, just going to have your feet apart a bit more, Ev, so we've got a bit of tension. And what I'm now going to get you a bit more tension again. Great, and we're going to display it on the right foot here. I want you to keep the knee pointing straight, and I want you to just raise your slight foot up, and I want you to turn your foot outwards as far as it can go, and then come all the way inwards. And then pushing all the way outwards, and coming all the way in. A nice, slow, controlled action. Perfect, and slowly coming in. These have to be done roughly 3 lots of 10 reps, like any type of strengthening repetition for muscles. Once a day is more than enough, and I even like to have that's enough, and I even like to have a separate day whereby you have a rest day in between. This is only the initial part of it. From there we get more functional, and he goes into more high-level hopping, jumping, and then specific running and cutting manoeuvres to get him ready for return to sport.